folks? Troy with V-Twins to V8s. I'm coming on to do a short video on restoring your lights. So like your tail lights, your side markers, they may look like this and be all scratched and dingy. This is off a 71 Datsun 240Z that I'm doing the restoration blog on. I'll put a card up there if you want to follow along, see what I'm doing now. But anyways, so I've got this lens and it looks like crap. But I want to take and polish it up so the lens looks nice and clean like this. And I am going to show you in a few simple steps and a little bit of time how you can get your lights looking nice and smooth and shiny like this again. So let's check it out. So what I'm going to want to do is sand the scratches out of my lenses, and to do that I'm going to do it in a method called scratch refinement. You've probably seen this, if not, in my sanding and polishing, in my repairing of stainless steel. I use this technique throughout all of those types of repairs. And all it really is starting out with a coarse grade of sandpaper and finishing off with a very fine one, and just going down incrementally. So the first thing I'm going to use on this is I'm going to sand this lens with some 600 grit sandpaper. So I'm going to get it sanded with 600 grit. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move to 1200 grit, and I am going to sand this with 1200 grit. Then I'm going to follow it with 2000 grit. Then I'm going to follow that with 2500 grit, and then we're going to use some special compounds and a buffer, and we're going to polish this out. So I'm going to walk you through the whole process. So let's get started on sanding this with some 600. Okay, so the first thing is, this is what our lens looks like before we start, and this is what the lens looks like when we're finished. So the first thing I want to do is I want to remove the scratches that you can see in this lens. And to do that, I am going to use some sandpaper. Okay, so here's my lens here, and as you can see, it's pretty dingy. I've got a piece of 600 wet and dry. I am going to fold it as such. And then I am just going to start sanding this. And as I sand this, I am going to just take a rag and wipe it. And as I do that, I'm going to look for scratches in the lens. What I'm trying to do is sand the scratches out of the lens. I'm not worried about the 600 grit scratches. I'm worried about the aging, the scratches that may have happened over time. So I will just sand this whole thing and sand all of these out, looking for scratches and continually wiping it off and looking to get rid of those scratches. Okay, so I'm going to sand this little area right here, and you're going to see some scratches. Now, the dust from my sanding has gone down into these little grooves, and you can really see it. So what I'm trying to do is to sand this down to get as much of these scratches out as possible. I mean, this is a piece of plastic, and I don't want to get too crazy, but I only have 600 grit paper here. But as you can see, if I continue to sand this, my scratches become less and less pronounced. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm not necessarily trying to make all of the scratches completely removed, but just make them so unnoticeable that in passing, the whole lens is just going to look nice and shiny and clean. So I'm just going to continue to do this, and as you can see, those areas are getting smaller and smaller. I'm going to continue to chase this out over the entire lens. So this isn't a fast process. It does take some time. But this is the first sanding is really kind of the most important one, because that's the one that's going to remove your scratches. All the subsequent sandings after this, the finer and finer sandpaper, are just designed to remove the scratches from this 600 grit that we're using here. So you want to really kind of work it, you know, little by little, and keep looking for scratches to sand out and get them all sanded out, and then move on to your finer sandpaper. But I'll show you how it goes as I go along. Like you can see where we started out, all of those scratches there are gone. This is starting to look pretty good. Only about from my thumb up really sticks out beyond the body, and all you really see is this red lens itself. So I'm not going to get into any of this other stuff here. Okay, so now I've got my tail light all sanded with the 600 grit, and if you look at it, I don't know how well you can see it on this camera, but I've sanded out most of everything that I could find on here. Now sometimes with these plastic lenses, what you will notice is there may be a line that you can't sand out because it's in fact might be a hairline crack. So you just got to do your best, and basically we're not trying to make it new, we're just trying to restore it to the point where it looks new, I guess is the best way to go. So I've got 600 now. I'm gonna get a piece of 1200 out from over here, and basically I'm just gonna sand back over it. Now when I sand with the 1200, it's a lot easier than when I sanded with the 600, because basically all I'm really trying to do is just go over this and sand out my 600 grit scratches. So I'll spend some time and sand this entire lens with this 1200, and then I will come back and show you what it looks like when I am done. But you can see basically what I'm doing. I'm just sanding away, you know what I mean? And if I take my little rag here and wipe it off, you can almost see it brightening up even with the 1200. And if you wanted to, you could go from 600 to 800 to 1000 to 1200. You could do it like that and really refine it down. But I found that jumping a few grades in between is kind of a shortcut, and it doesn't really seem to make much of a difference in the end result. I mean, you know, if you're a perfectionist, like I am anyways, but I mean, there's also a balance of how much time and effort for, you know, the results. And I found that using a lot of sandpaper and going over it a bunch of times, it's just an act of diminishing results. You're doing a lot more work for not really much of a difference. So I'm going to go over this whole thing with this 1200, and I'll show you what we have. Okay. So here's my tail light after I am down to 1200. So from 1200, I am going to drop myself down to, I believe it was 2000. Yep, that's 2000 right here. I'm going to take my 2000 grit sandpaper, and I am going to chase out all the 1200 grit scratches that I can find. And just like this, just keep on keeping on. And you'll kind of see it as it goes. Every time you move to the next finer piece of sandpaper, the lens will tend to brighten up just a little bit more. If you give me a second here, I can probably wipe this little area off, and you may see a difference between this area and the 1200 grit area. Yeah, you're starting to see it. So if you look really close in this area, I don't know if the angle would be right, you'll start to see it brighten here compared to, say, here or over here. And that's what we're trying to do. We're just trying to refine these scratches finer and finer to the point where we can just polish them out. Okay, so now we're all sanded with our 2000 grit, and you can see it is starting to brighten. I mean, it's not super shiny yet, but if you could look at it close enough, you'd notice that most of our scratches are gone, and it almost has a bit of a shine to itself already. So final round is going to be the 2500. I'm going to break that out. We're going to give it a good sanding with that, and then we'll be moving on to some polishing. So I've got my 2500 grit out. I use 3M. I'll put links to all of my products at the bottom of the video, so you can replicate my results. And it's just the same old all over again. Sanding, sanding, sanding. Okay, now we're down for the time you've all been waiting for. We're gonna go take this that's been sanded all the way down to 2500 and make it nice and shiny like that. So we're gonna take this, put it off to the side, and I'm gonna talk to you about the products that I use for this. So I work with a company called Novus, and I have this 3-step system that Novus has, and number 3 is for heavy scratches, number 2 is for fine scratches, and number 1, it just kind of cleans and shines it up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an orbital small buffer that I got from the folks at Dry Odds Garage. I'm going to use a fairly stiff orange pad, and I'm going to use this heavy scratch remover, and I'm going to buff this. Now I'll use my helmet cam so that you can watch this happen, and it will polish these scratches out, but it will have a little bit of a dullness to it that we will take care of with number 2, and then we'll really gloss it up with number 1. So let's have at it. Really see how that's really shined that right up. I'm going to continue on with the rest of it. So now I can wipe my compound off, I get that wiped off, and this is what we're starting to look like here. You can see it's starting to really shine itself back up. You don't see any of those scratches. Looks really good. I'm going to get this cleaned up. I'll move over to the other side, then we'll move on to number 2. Okay. So this is the shine we have after the first application of the number 3, the heavy scratch remover. Looks pretty good. I look it all over just like if I was buffing paint, and I don't really see much of any scratches. So I'm going to move to the fine scratch remover, and I'm going to change my pad from this kind of a stiff orangey pad that I have here to a nice soft black pad. And I'm going to spread my fine scratch remover on here, and we're going to have at this and polish it up. So here we go. Okay, so here we are. I polished this whole thing up with step number 2, and look at that. It looks almost as good as our other one. So at this point, all we really need to do is to just go back over it with step number 1, which is just the clean and shine, and that you just spray on. And you take a microfiber towel and you just polish it up. It's basically just like a cleaner polish. It just kind of removes all of the compound residue, shines things up, kind of like almost like a quick detailer type of material. and it really tends to bring the shine up. And there you go. So as you can see, our taillights are now pretty darn minty. I'm going to kind of look at them in the different angles, and everything looks pretty darn sexy. So I want to thank you for tuning in, and I'll leave a list of the products I used in this video down below. Please use my links, it helps me out. Give me a thumbs up, that would always be great. And subscribe if you want to learn more techniques on how to restore your car on a budget. So thanks for tuning in, and good luck on your project.